Prepare to be stunned by these shocking revelations about a war that shaped North America in ways you never imagined. Did you know the US invaded Canada, Washington, D.C. was burned to the ground, and New England almost became its own country? Let's dive into the gripping, forgotten moments of the War of 1812. Fact 1. The War of 1812 is a bigger deal in Canada than in the US. While the Star-Spangled Banner and the USS Constitution became American symbols, the war itself is often overlooked in the US, overshadowed by the American Revolution and the Civil War. But in Canada, it's a national milestone, a defining moment when Canadians, standing united, fought off American invasions and forged a national identity. The Canadian government even spent nearly $30 million commemorating it with bicentennial events, while the U.S. spate, Congress barely even acknowledged it. Fact 2. The U.S. thought conquering Canada would be a walk in the park. Imagine the arrogance. U.S. leaders believed Canada, a British colony with just 1/20 of their population, would welcome them as liberators. Thomas Jefferson famously said it would be a mere matter of marching. Even the U.S. Secretary of War confidently declared, "We can take Canada without soldiers." But Canadians had other plans. Instead of open arms, they took up arms, successfully pushing back the American invaders with fierce determination. Fact 3. Canada had its own Paul Revere, but she was a woman. You've heard of Paul Revere, but have you heard of Laura Secord? This courageous Canadian warned the British of an impending American attack. Born in Massachusetts to a Revolutionary War patriot, she seemed an unlikely Canadian hero. But when the moment came, Secord defied the odds and played a crucial role in securing Canada's defenses, ensuring a place for herself in the annals of history. These are just a few of the wild, thrilling stories behind the War of 1812. Buckle up, because the rest will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Fact 4. A mother's daring trek saved the British at Beaver Dams. On the evening of June 21, 1813, a 37-year-old mother of 5 and the wife of a Canadian Loyalist soldier, Laura Secord, stumbled upon a chilling secret. American forces were planning a surprise ambush on a nearby British outpost. With her husband bedridden from injuries, Secord took it upon herself to make an unimaginable journey. The very next day, she trekked 20 miles through swamps, forests, and treacherous terrain to warn the British. Her daring act of bravery changed the course of the war, as the Americans were decisively defeated at the Battle of Beaver Dams thanks to her warning. Fact 5. The Star-Spangled Banner is actually based on a drinking song. The famous American national anthem has a surprising origin. After a brutal night of British bombardment on September 3, 1814, dawn broke over Fort McHenry to reveal the American flag still defiantly waving. Moved by the sight, lawyer Francis Scott Key hastily wrote down 4 powerful verses, calling his work Defense of Fort McHenry. But here's the twist. The melody to which these patriotic lyrics were later set was an Old English drinking song called To Anacreon in Heaven. Within weeks, this unlikely pairing was immortalized under the title we all know today, the Star-Spangled Banner. Who knew such profound history was wrapped in such dramatic moments and surprising origins? Fact 6. The anthem we know today was once an English drinking tune. It's hard to believe, but the song that became the U.S. national anthem in 1931 was originally set to the melody of To Anacreon in Heaven, an English drinking song. Musicologists suggest that when Francis Scott Key penned the lyrics to what would become the Star-Spangled Banner, he already had this familiar tune in mind. The blend of stirring patriotism with a song once sung in taverns is a remarkable twist to the anthem's legacy. Fact 7. New England nearly broke away from the United States during the War of 1812. Here's a jaw-dropping fact. The concepts of states' rights, nullification, and even secession, typically associated with the southern states, were first pushed by New Englanders during the War of 1812. From the outset, New England vehemently opposed what they called Mr. Madison's War, named after President James Madison. The region suffered under crippling British naval blockades, and by 1814, things had gotten so desperate that Nantucket declared itself neutral. The governor of Massachusetts even sent a secret envoy to negotiate a separate peace with the British. Incredibly, some New Englanders openly advocated for secession, flirting with the idea of breaking away from the Union. The War of 1812 wasn't just about battles on the field, it nearly tore the country apart from within. Fact 8. New England's secret convention almost led to secession. In the final weeks of 1814, New England was on the brink of breaking away from the United States. Behind closed doors, 26 delegates met at the Hartford Convention to discuss their discontent with Mr. Madison's war. While they ultimately decided against secession, the convention strongly endorsed the controversial concepts of states' rights and nullification, ideas that would resurface with greater intensity decades later in the lead-up to the Civil War. Fact 9. Before Washington, D.C. burned, Americans set fire to Canada's capital. It wasn't just the British who wreaked havoc by torching cities during the War of 1812. American forces struck first. In 1813, more than a year before the British set Washington, D.C. ablaze, American troops stormed York, modern-day Toronto, the capital of Upper Canada. After a deadly ammunition explosion killed 300 Americans, enraged U.S. soldiers retaliated by burning the provincial parliament and several public buildings. To this day, a British Imperial Lion, looted during the attack, remains in the possession of the U.S. Naval Academy, an enduring relic of the chaos. Fact 10. A miracle storm and deadly tornado saved Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was left in ruins after British forces set it on fire in 1814, but the city's complete destruction was miraculously averted. As flames engulfed the capital, a fierce thunderstorm rolled in, quelling much of the blaze. Then, a lethal tornado swept through, driving the British forces out of the city. The storm's serendipitous timing not only saved what remained of Washington, but may have prevented an even more devastating defeat. The War of 1812 is full of unexpected twists, from near secessions to natural forces coming to the rescue. Fact 11. Nature's wrath stopped the British from destroying Washington completely. On August 24, 1814, British troops stormed Washington, D.C., setting fire to the White House, Capitol, and several other key federal buildings. The following day, as the city burned, a massive 2-hour thunderstorm rolled in, extinguishing the flames and bringing the arson spree to an end. But nature wasn't done yet. During the storm, a rare tornado touched down, ripping roofs off buildings, collapsing a bridge over the Potomac River, and even hurling 2 cannons into the air. Remarkably, the National Weather Service reports that the flying debris from the tornado killed more British soldiers than American resistance did during the occupation. This furious display of nature might have saved Washington from complete destruction. Fact 12. Washington, D.C. was almost abandoned after the fire. When Congress returned to Washington, D.C. in September 1814, they found the city in ruins and spirits shattered. With the Capitol buildings still smoldering and no permanent place to meet, Congress gathered in makeshift quarters. Faced with a daunting and expensive reconstruction effort, many members seriously considered moving the Capitol back to Philadelphia. Washington, D.C. had barely survived the fire, and now it was on the brink of being abandoned as the nation's capital, a decision that could have forever changed the face of American history. Fact 13. Washington, D.C. survived by a narrow margin. After weeks of intense debate, the fate of Washington, D.C. hung in the balance. The House of Representatives came dangerously close to abandoning the city as the nation's capital after the devastating fires, but in a narrow vote, 83 to 74, they decided to stay. Had just a few votes shifted, the political heart of the United States might have moved back to Philadelphia, altering the course of American history forever. Fact 14. America's greatest victory came after the war was over. In one of history's most ironic twists, the most celebrated American victory of the War of 1812 happened after the peace treaty was signed. On Christmas Eve 1814, American and British diplomats in Ghent, modern-day Belgium, agreed to end the war. But back in the U.S., it would take weeks for that news to arrive. In the meantime, future President Andrew Jackson led a resounding defeat of the British at the Battle of New Orleans on January 8, 1815. This victory, which came after peace had already been agreed upon, became a defining moment in American military history. The war officially ended when President James Madison signed the Senate-ratified Treaty of Ghent on February 17, 1815. Fact 15. Who won the War of 1812? No one really knows the War of 1812 ended with no clear winner. Both sides claimed success, yet neither gained significant territory or decisive advantage. What is clear, though, is who lost. The indigenous nations allied with both sides, whose lands and sovereignty were further eroded during and after the conflict. For the United States, the war bolstered a sense of national pride and resilience. For the British, it reinforced their dominance on the seas. But for many Native American tribes, the war's end signaled a devastating loss of territory and autonomy that would shape their fate for generations to come. Fact 16. The War of 1812 was a draw, but not for Native Americans. In what many called a rematch of the American Revolution, the War of 1812 ended in a stalemate between the United States and Great Britain. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in 1814, restored the pre-war borders, reverting both nations to the status quo antebellum. Essentially, nothing changed for the two main players. However, for Native American tribes who had fought alongside the British in an effort to halt American expansion, the war left a lasting and devastating impact. With their British allies weakened and European protection gone, Native American nations were left vulnerable. This power shift opened the door for the United States to push westward with increasing force in the decades that followed, leading to the erosion of native lands and sovereignty. For indigenous peoples, the War of 1812 marked the beginning of a tragic legacy, setting the stage for relentless American expansion and the loss of their homelands.